Growing up in my family, I always felt like second best. I'm April, 32 years old, and for as long as I can remember, my older sister Hannah was the golden child. She did everything right according to my parents, got married at 24, had 2 kids by 27, and basically fulfilled the perfect daughter checklist. Meanwhile, I focused on my career, saved my money, and stayed single, apparently a cardinal sin in my family's eyes. My parents never missed a chance to remind me that I should be more like Hannah. "When are you getting married, April?" or "Don't you want children before it's too late?" were their favorite conversation starters. It didn't matter that I had a stable job, my own apartment, and was financially independent. Without a husband and kids, I was somehow failing at life. Then Hannah's perfect life started crumbling. Her husband turned out to be a complete jerk who cheated on her repeatedly. When she finally decided to divorce him last year, guess who she turned to for help? Me. I paid for her lawyer, not a cheap expense, and even covered 6 months of rent for her and my nephews, James and Ethan, while the divorce was being finalized. I love my nephews, they're 5 and 7, and none of this mess is their fault. When her ex-husband skipped town to avoid paying child support, Hannah moved into a small apartment with the boys. I thought things were settling down until I got a call from my mom last Wednesday. "April, honey, we have such good news, can you come over tonight?" Mom sounded unusually excited. "What's going on? Did they find Hannah's ex? Is he finally paying child support?" I asked, figuring that would be the only good news that would warrant an immediate family meeting. No, even better. Just come over as soon as you can, Hannah will be here too." I drove over after work, curious about what could have my parents so excited. When I arrived, they were all sitting in the living room with these weird smiles on their faces. Dad had a folder in his hands. "There she is," Dad stood up, hugging me quickly before handing me the folder. "Take a look at this, sweetie." I opened it up and saw a stack of papers with mortgage agreement on the top. I flipped through pages of legal text, completely confused. "What is this?" I asked, looking up at their expectant faces. Mom clapped her hands together. "It's for Hannah's new house. We used all our savings and some of our retirement funds for the down payment. Isn't it wonderful?" "Oh, that's great news," I said, genuinely happy for my sister. A house would be much better for the boys than that tiny apartment. "Congratulations, Hannah, the boys will love having a yard." I tried to hand the folder back to Mom, but she pushed it back toward me. "No, April, these documents are for you now." I stared at her, confused. "What do you mean they're for me?" Dad cleared his throat. "Well, we've discussed this as a family, and we've decided that you should be the one to pay for this mortgage." The room went silent as I tried to process his words. I thought it was some kind of joke, but their faces were dead serious. "You want me to pay for Hannah's mortgage?" I repeated slowly. Mom nodded enthusiastically. "We know you've saved up quite a bit in your account. You've been saving for years. You could pay off a large chunk of the loan right away, or you could make the monthly payments." "Hannah can't possibly afford the payments right now," Dad added. "She's a single mother with 2 small children." I looked at Hannah, who was staring at the floor. "You're okay with this? You expect me to pay for your house?" Hannah finally looked up. "After David left, I have nothing. They can't even find him for child support. The boys need stability." My brain was still trying to catch up. "These aren't my problems. I already helped you through the divorce. I paid for your lawyer and 6 months of rent. I've been renting for years and never asked anyone for help." "But April," Mom cut in, "we raised you for many years. Now it's time for you to pay us back." "Pay you back, for raising me?" My voice was getting louder now. "That was your job as parents. I don't owe you for that. Why did you even buy a house for Hannah if you knew she couldn't afford it?" I demanded. My father's expression hardened. "Because we knew you would pay for it. You have a good salary and no family or children to support." Mom reached for my hand, which I quickly pulled away. "April, don't argue. The house has already been purchased. You need to help your sister and your nephews. I stood up, my hands shaking. No, absolutely not. I've been saving for my house for 10 years. I'm not giving that money to anyone else. I grabbed the folder and threw it on the coffee table. This is insane, I'm leaving. As I walked out, I heard Hannah start to cry and my mother calling after me, but I didn't look back. I got in my car and drove away, my mind racing with memories of all the times Hannah had been favored over me. This was just the latest and most outrageous example. The funny thing was, Hannah's perfect life that my parents had always held up as an example had fallen apart completely. Her husband had abandoned her and the kids. But somehow, that was now my problem to fix. I drove home in a fog, wondering if I was overreacting. But the more I thought about it, the angrier I got. They seriously expected me to hand over my savings or commit to years of mortgage payments for a house that wasn't even mine. The audacity was breathtaking. When I got home, I poured myself a large glass of wine and tried to calm down. They'd realize how ridiculous their request was, I told myself. They'd call tomorrow and apologize. Several days passed with no word from my family. I started to think that maybe they'd come to their senses and realized how absurd their demand was. I went about my life, focusing on work and trying to put the whole mess behind me. But I should have known better. When it comes to my family, nothing is ever that simple. The first call came on a Tuesday evening while I was making dinner. My phone lit up with my cousin Melissa's name. We'd never been particularly close, but we were civil at family gatherings. "April, I just heard what happened," she said without even saying hello. "I can't believe you're being so selfish." I nearly dropped my phone. "Excuse me? Your sister needs help, and you're just sitting on a pile of money. Those are your nephews we're talking about. Don't you care about them at all?" I closed my eyes and counted to 10 before responding. "Melissa, you don't know the whole story." "I know enough. Hannah is struggling as a single mom, and you won't lift a finger to help." "That's pretty cold, April." Before I could defend myself, she continued, "Family helps family. That's how it works. Your sister would do it for you if the situations were reversed." I laughed bitterly at that. "No, she wouldn't. And I've already helped Hannah plenty. I paid her rent for 6 months and covered her entire divorce." "That's different. This is a home for those boys. Don't you want them to have stability?" After hanging up on Melissa, the floodgates opened. My phone buzzed constantly with calls and texts from relatives I barely spoke to. Uncle Rick, who I hadn't seen in 2 years, left a voicemail telling me I was ungrateful and needed to step up for family. My cousin Emily texted that I was selfish for hoarding my money while Hannah struggled. It didn't take a genius to figure out what was happening. Hannah had always been the social butterfly of the family, the life of every party and gathering. I was the opposite, reserved and private, preferring to avoid the chaos of family events whenever possible. Hannah had clearly leveraged her popularity to turn the extended family against me. The most infuriating call came from my Aunt Susan, my mother's sister. "April, honey, I'm just calling to talk some sense into you," she said in that condescending tone she'd perfected over the years. "Aunt Susan, I don't want to discuss this. Just listen, you're not getting any younger, and who knows if you'll ever get married or have children of your own. At least this way, you can contribute to James and Ethan's future. They're the continuation of your family line." I was dumbfounded. "So because I'm single, I should just hand over my life savings to my sister?" "Don't be dramatic, I'm just saying that your nephews are blood, and right now, they need a home. Hannah can't do this alone." "What about their father?" I asked. "Why isn't anyone hunting him down to pay child support instead of coming after my money?" "That's different and you know it. David is gone, and the boys need help now." After that call, I blocked everyone. Every single relative who tried to shame me into paying for Hannah's mortgage got added to my blocked list. If they couldn't respect my boundaries, they didn't deserve access to me. 2 peaceful months passed. I thought the worst was over, that my family had finally accepted my decision and moved on. I was wrong. The envelope arrived on a Thursday. At first, I thought it was just another bill, but when I opened it, my blood ran cold. It was a notice that my parents had filed a lawsuit against me, demanding that I pay them $350,000 for expenses incurred during my upbringing. I read the document 3 times, unable to believe what I was seeing. They were actually suing me for the cost of raising me, claiming they'd spent money on food, medical care, vacations, and even mental support during my college application process. According to them, it was time for me to repay a portion of their investment. My hands shook as I called the best lawyer I could find. After explaining the situation, she agreed to meet with me the next day. "They have absolutely no legal right to your money," Jennifer, my lawyer, assured me after reviewing the lawsuit. "Parents are legally obligated to provide for their minor children. There's no expectation of repayment." "So why are they doing this?" I asked, still stunned by the whole situation. "It could be a pressure tactic. They might think you'll just give in rather than go through a court battle," she explained. "Or they might genuinely believe they're entitled to compensation. Either way, we need to gather evidence to show the judge how ridiculous this claim is." I spent the next few weeks pulling together bank statements, receipts, and any documentation that might help my case. I found proof of every time I'd helped my parents or Hannah financially, the rent payments, the lawyer fees, even smaller amounts I'd sent when they claimed to be short on bills. When the court date arrived, I was nervous but prepared. Jennifer had assured me that the case was likely to be dismissed, but I couldn't help worrying. My family had always had a way of making me doubt myself. Walking into the courtroom was surreal. On one side sat my parents and Hannah, surrounded by aunts, uncles, and cousins who'd come to support them. The only people there for me were my grandparents, my mom's parents, ironically enough. They had called me after hearing about the lawsuit and had been appalled by their daughter's behavior. "We're here for you, sweetheart," Grandma whispered, squeezing my hand as we took our seats. "What your parents are doing isn't right." I glanced at my grandparents, grateful for their support, and took a deep breath. Whatever happened next, I wasn't going to back down. The courtroom felt colder than it should have in the middle of summer. My parents sat across from me with expressions that mixed self-righteousness with disappointment. Hannah kept her eyes down, occasionally glancing up to give me what I assumed was supposed to be a guilt-inducing look. My father spoke first, his voice echoing through the room. "Your Honor, we've invested our entire lives and considerable financial resources into raising April. We're only asking for a small fraction of what we've spent on her over the years." The judge, a man in his 60s with kind but shrewd eyes, looked at my father thoughtfully. "And specifically, what did you spend on her education after she turned 18? My parents exchanged glances. Dad cleared his throat. "Well, at that time, our eldest daughter had just gotten married. We were helping her get established, so our finances were directed there." "So you didn't contribute to the defendant's college education?" the judge clarified. "No," my mother jumped in, "but my mother, April's grandmother, did. Since that's my mother, I think it's fair to say we had a hand in that support." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My grandma had indeed helped me with college costs, along with my partial scholarship, but my parents had never contributed a dime. Now they were trying to take credit for my grandmother's generosity. My lawyer stood up. "Your Honor, I'd like to present evidence showing that Ms. Sanders has not only been financially independent since age 18 but has actually provided substantial financial support to both her parents and sister." She handed over my bank statements, highlighting the numerous transfers to my parents over the years, $500 here, $1,000 there, sometimes as much as $2,000 when they claimed to be in financial trouble. Additionally, my lawyer continued, "I have documentation showing that Ms. Sanders paid her sister's rent for 6 months during her divorce proceedings, amounting to $7,200. She also paid $5,500 for her sister's divorce attorney." The judge looked at my parents. "So the defendant wasn't receiving financial support from you, but rather providing it to you and her sister?" My mother shifted uncomfortably. "That money has nothing to do with this lawsuit. We're talking about what we spent raising her." "Mrs. Sanders," the judge said patiently, why exactly do you need $350,000 from your daughter? Mom glanced at Hannah before answering. We plan to use it to pay the mortgage for our eldest daughter. The courtroom fell silent, even some of the relatives who had come to support my parents looked uncomfortable now. The judge turned to Hannah. So, Ms. Sanders, you believe your sister should pay for your mortgage because… Hannah finally looked up. April isn't married, she doesn't have children. I have 2 boys to support on my own. Family should help family. The judge actually smiled at this. I'm not married either, I don't have children. Does that mean I should be financially responsible for my court clerk's mortgage? Or perhaps my bailiff's family expenses? Hannah's face flushed red. That's different, she's my sister. And that creates a financial obligation? The judge pressed. We're family, my mother interjected. Family helps each other. Mrs. Sanders, did you help your daughter financially after she turned 18? The judge asked. Like I said, we were helping Hannah at that time. So you prioritized one child over the other? The judge's tone was neutral, but the question hit home. For the next hour, the judge asked my parents and Hannah increasingly uncomfortable questions. Why did they think I owed them money for raising me? Why did they believe I should sacrifice my savings for Hannah's house? Why hadn't they considered whether Hannah could actually afford the mortgage before purchasing the house? Throughout it all, my grandparents sat behind me, their presence a silent comfort. I'd always been closer to them than to my parents, though I'd never fully understood why until now. Finally, the judge said he'd deliberate and render his decision in a week. As we left the courtroom, my grandparents immediately hugged me. You did great, sweetheart, Grandpa said. Don't worry about any of this nonsense. The week that followed was the longest of my life. I tried to focus on work, but my mind kept returning to the courtroom, to the expressions on my parents' faces, to Hannah's entitlement. Had I been wrong all these years about our relationship? Had I imagined that we were ever close? When we returned to court the following week, the judge didn't waste time. After reviewing the evidence in this case, he began, I find the plaintiff's claim against the defendant to be without merit. Mr. and Mrs. Sanders, the financial responsibility of parenthood does not entitle you to reimbursement once your child becomes an adult. In fact, the evidence shows that Ms. April Sanders has already provided significant financial support to both you and her sister. He paused, looking directly at my parents. Frankly, I find your behavior toward your daughter to be brazen and disappointing. This lawsuit is dismissed. Relief washed over me. It was over. They couldn't force me to pay for Hannah's house or reimburse them for raising me. As we left the courtroom, my grandparents congratulated me. We're proud of you for standing your ground, Grandma said. My mother approached one last time. You should be ashamed, she said, her voice trembling. You just celebrated your family's defeat in court. My grandmother turned to her daughter, Susan, that's enough. The court made the right decision, accept it and move on. I walked away, feeling lighter than I had in months. The battle was over, and I had won, or so I thought. A week later, my grandparents called me. April, we need to tell you something, Grandma said, her voice tired. Your mother came to us yesterday. She asked us to give her her inheritance now, so they could pay off Hannah's mortgage. I sat down, suddenly exhausted. What did you tell her? I told her that we haven't decided who gets what in our will, and that everyone will find out after we're gone, Grandma replied. She cried and begged us not to disinherit her. I told her that's our decision to make. Even after the lawsuit, even after the judge had ruled in my favor, they were still trying to find ways to get money for Hannah's house. Would it ever end? 6 months passed. With the lawsuit behind me and my family keeping their distance, I was finally able to focus on what I'd been saving for all these years, my own home. I'd accumulated enough for a decent down payment on a small house in a quiet neighborhood about 20 minutes from my workplace. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine, and signing those mortgage papers felt like the culmination of a decade of hard work and sacrifice. Moving in was both exhausting and exhilarating. I spent weekends painting walls, arranging furniture, and slowly turning the empty rooms into a home. For the first time in my life, I felt truly independent. This was my space, bought with my money, decorated to my taste, with no one to criticize or judge my choices. I didn't hear much from my parents or Hannah during this time, and that was fine by me. My grandparents visited regularly, though, bringing housewarming gifts and helping me settle in. They were my only connection to family news. "Hannah moved back in with your parents," Grandma told me one Sunday as we sat on my new porch swing. "She's renting out the house. She's using the rental income to cover the mortgage payments. Your mother is watching the boys while Hannah works." "At least they figured out a solution," I said, feeling a strange mix of relief and vindication. "Your parents still complain about you to anyone who'll listen," Grandma continued, patting my hand. "They say you abandoned your sister in her time of need." I sighed. "Of course they do. Don't worry about it, I've been setting the record straight with the relatives. Some of them are starting to understand your side now. Your Aunt Patty even told your mother to stop bringing it up at family gatherings." It was small comfort, but comfort nonetheless. At least some of my relatives were finally seeing the situation clearly. Life settled into a pleasant rhythm. I focused on my job, made improvements to my house, and even started dating someone I'd met through work. The drama with my family began to feel like a distant bad dream. Then, a year after the trial, I opened my email to find a message from my parents. My heart raced as I clicked on it, unsure what to expect. "Dear April," it began, "we've heard that you bought a house for yourself. Since you now have extra space, we think it would be best if Hannah and the boys moved in with you. It would be much more convenient for them there. Let us know when they can move in. Love, Mom and Dad." I stared at the screen in disbelief. After everything that had happened, the demands, the lawsuit, the courtroom battle, they were now suggesting that my sister and nephews should move into my house? The house I'd saved for years to buy? The audacity was staggering. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a long moment before I finally typed my response: "I will not be hosting Hannah or the boys. If you contact me again with these kinds of demands, I will report the harassment to the police. Do not email me again." I hit send before I could second-guess myself. Then I blocked their email addresses, just as I'd blocked their phone numbers months ago. That evening, I called my grandparents to tell them what had happened. "I'm not surprised," Grandpa said, "they still don't understand boundaries." "I told them I'd report them for harassment if they kept it up," I admitted. "Was that too harsh?" "Not at all," Grandma said firmly, "you have every right to live your life in peace." "I just don't understand why they keep pushing," I said. "Haven't they learned anything from all this?" "Some people never learn," Grandma replied sadly. "Your mother has always favored Hannah, ever since you were little girls. It's not fair, and it's not right, but it's how she is." We talked a while longer, and by the time we hung up, I felt calmer. My grandparents had become my rock through all of this, the family I could count on when my parents and sister had proven themselves unworthy of that title. These days, life is good, my house is coming together nicely. I painted the kitchen yellow, planted a garden in the backyard, and even adopted a cat who keeps me company on quiet evenings. My grandparents visit often, and I've made friends with several neighbors. I haven't spoken to my parents or Hannah since that final email exchange. Sometimes I feel a twinge of sadness about the relationship we might have had in another life, one where they respected my boundaries and treated me as an equal to Hannah. But I don't regret standing up for myself. Some family ties aren't worth preserving if they only bring pain and manipulation. My grandparents tell me that Hannah is still living with our parents, still renting out her house to cover the mortgage. Apparently, my parents continue to complain about me to relatives, though fewer and fewer are willing to listen. Grandma says they're tired of hearing the same stories over and over. I don't know what the future holds for my relationship with my parents and sister. Maybe someday they'll realize how unfairly they treated me. Maybe they'll apologize and try to make amends. I'm not holding my breath, but I'm not entirely closing that door either. What I do know is that I'm happy in the life I built for myself, a life that's mine alone, earned through hard work and perseverance, not through manipulating or using others. In the end, that's something to be proud of, regardless of what my family thinks. So here I am, April at 33, homeowner, cat mom, and survivor of family drama that would make even the most dysfunctional reality TV show seem tame. Life goes on, and surprisingly enough, it's pretty good.